When did your gut feeling of something's not right here save you? Story 1 worked as a shot girl at a pub. One night, I rejected someone who attempted to get my number. Not unusual, and he didn't seem that bothered. The whole exchange wasn't strange to me. In the early hours after the bar closed, I went to leave through the back door into the car park like usual when I saw the sensor light outside was on. Someone was stood just outside the door. I felt uneasy, so I went out the front and asked one of the bouncers to walk me around the back to my car. As we rounded the corner, we spotted this guy lurking outside the door, holding his belt like a makeshift garrote. When he saw us, he started screaming that I was and I should die. He scampered off into the road and never came back. Story 2, someone came into my work that gave me the in danger feeling. I work in a place where 60 of my customers are children, and I naturally get very protective of them. But you can't call the police because someone's creeping you out. He kept getting close to children, but not doing anything or even making them uncomfortable, so there still wasn't anything I could do. He leaves and I shrug off. Another customer soon comes in and gives me the same feeling. So I'm thinking him just anxious today. He's talking about Donkey Kong and stuff. Casual conversation. Then he says I'm best friends with Martin Bryant, the spree killer from the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, who is in solitary confinement and can't even interact with whoever has to throw his food at him. So I'm getting a bit nervous now. Then the first creepy guy comes in, and the one I was talking to says I know him. We went to prison together. So immediately I start having a panic attack and have to end the conversation as quick as possible so I can contact the manager to say I need someone else to come into the store. I was there alone, and they immediately call the police. Turns out they were both registered offenders. Neither were allowed anywhere near my work because it's too close to the CBD, and they're legally now allowed near anywhere that could have children there. I actually recently went to court for this, waited hours to go in, and he pleaded guilty at the very, very last second. Edit, I offered way too many details, and now I'm super uncomfortable with everyone guessing where I work. I've had terrible experiences with people finding out where I work, and I'm a bit spooked. I woke up at 3 a.m., once sitting upright in bed. I fell on alert, and my heart raced when I saw that my cat was on alert too, wide awake by my feet with his ears perked up. But I didn't see or hear anything weird. Something didn't feel right, and I couldn't relax, so I got up and went to the kitchen, turned on some lights, and ate food, even though I wasn't that hungry. Eventually went back to bed. We discovered the next morning that someone had stopped while in the process of using some kind of tool to silently cut a big hole in the glass window in the living room. They were trying to break in right next to the bedroom. I think the lights I turned on scared them away. Edited to add that we had 3 long years of issues with our neighbors. They repeatedly came into our property and were pissed that we put up a 9-foot fence to keep them out. This attempted break-in happened right after the fence went up and 2 days before they all moved out. Glad those pieces are long gone. Story 3 went to a college party, and one of the guys made me feel very uncomfortable. He didn't ever do anything to me, but something seemed off. I kept dumping my shots because getting smashed seemed like a bad idea. I ended up taking a friend and leaving while he told us that we were being lame by not having more of the Grey Goose. He raped another girl at the party that night. Story 4, I'm a firefighter. We got called out to a tree fire started by fallen power lines. We pull up in the truck, and I'm trusting that my driver and crew leader are doing their job and have good situational awareness. We get out of the truck, and we've parked next to a set of power lines not fallen. It's a very windy night, and I can see the line swinging, so I voice my concerns to my crew leader, who says ITLL be fine. We get out, hose out risk of the tree fire, catching onto a house, outweighing potential risk of arcing plus the line disconnected when it fell, and I'm on the branch ready to start putting it out with 2 others near me when I get a chill. I look up, see the lines swinging violently, and yell, everyone move. As the 3 of us sprint and dive out of the way, we hear a thwip and crack, and sure enough, the line we were under came loose and stayed connected to the power pole. If I hadn't got that chill, chances are we would have had 3 fried fireys. Story 5 had a friend who said we should go to this party. He was invited to by a classmate of his. We ended driving out to it. We noticed the neighborhood was not too pleasant and sketchy. We saw that house had some lights on in the backyard, but kind of quiet for a party. I decided that we should not go since something felt really off. Friend ended finding the classmate that invited him got robbed and threatened when he went to party. It ended up being a fake party. Story 6, when I was in middle school and around 14 years old, I was returning home. I lived like 5 minutes away from said school, and I noticed there was a man following me. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at his phone, and he wore a cap, so I wasn't able to see his face fully. Anyways, he gave off this weird vibe. I reached my apartment building, and the guy was still behind me. I know mostly everyone who lives in my neighborhood, and I couldn't recall him. Last moment, I decided I wasn't going to go inside the hallway. I turned around and went to the store where I waited for my mom to come. A few weeks after there was some news about an 11-year-old girl from my school who was raped in the building right behind mine 2 days after the incident, the guy they caught looked a lot like the guy who had followed me. And given the time frame and the proximity, there's a high chance that it was him. Story 7, my daughter was a year and a half at the time. She had a cold, but bedtime went off without a hitch. I woke up in the middle of the night that night, really uncomfortable and anxious. Something was off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I got up, had a midnight snack, tried to calm my nerves. I decided to check on my kids, who shared a room, before trying to go back to sleep. I get in there, and immediately I hear a light sound coming from her crib wheezing. It was so quiet, there was no way to hear it outside of the room. I got her up and saw that her breathing was fast and labored. I took her to the hospital, where she ended up with an overnight stay, oxygen, and nebulizer treatments. Because her oxygen had dipped, she was diagnosed with reactive airway disease due to the cold, which triggered the asthma attack. Story 8, at age 5, I was almost abducted by strangers at the park who had a bunch of toys on a blanket and tried to lure me into their motorhome. I looked back to my dad, who was talking to his friend, maybe 100 yards away. I got a tummy ache when one of them tried to coax me by reaching for my arm to lead me away, and I screamed and ran back to my dad. Years later, I found out those same people had abducted other kids who weren't so lucky. Never ignored a gut feeling since. Thanks for all the positive feedback, and FYI, trust me, once my dad got over the shock, he let me have it for not only wandering off, but speaking to complete strangers. I talked to my mom a bit about it today, and she told me my dad broke down and blamed himself. Positive outlook on this though, guys. This is just one instance, scary as it may be, where my gut led me in the right direction, and my instinct for danger is now uncanny. I truly believe everything happens for a reason. I trusted my instincts, and it kept me safe, still does. Story 9, not me, but when my mom was a teenager on November 18th, 1987, she was going to London to visit a friend. It was around 7:20 p.m., and she decided she was going to take a taxi instead of going by tube because it didn't feel right. King's Cross tube station. 10 minutes later, the whole station caught on fire, and 30 out of the 40 people died. If she had decided to take the tube, she would likely have died. Story 10, while I was walking home. Wasn't late, and in from a pretty safe area, but it was that time of year when it starts to get dark really early, so felt kind of ominous. Anyway, I passed this guy in a red sweater and red tracksuit bottoms, and he looks at me funny. Maybe he's high. Maybe he's drunk. Either way, something not quite right about him. I keep going, look behind me. He's still there, across the road. He crosses with me. As soon as I turn a corner, I sprint to my apartment complex and run into the coded gate and wait. He rocks up a minute later and stares at me through the gate. He just stares at me for a good 10 or so seconds and runs back the way he came, shivers. Story 11, posted this before. Took my 2 babies to an in-home daycare run by a lovely woman. About 9 days in, the woman's teenage son was home when I picked up my kids. He gave me a super creepy vibe, pulled the kids from the daycare, and placed them elsewhere. Maybe 10 years later, that kid murdered 2 people, then killed his mom. Story 12, some dude get off the bus at the same stop as me. It's about 8 p.m. in October, so it's quite dark out already. He had spoken to me on the bus. One line about nice weather. Anyway, he gets off the bus after me. I cross the road and make a mental note of him walking the opposite way to me. I make sure to watch him walking away. Something in my gut says not to trust him. To get to my house, I have to walk up a hill with a path alongside a high stone wall. It is secluded. Usually I listen to music as I walk. I decide not to this time. I'm about halfway up when I get this awful feeling. I take out my phone, dial my mother's number, and as I do, I hear fast steps of someone running up behind me. I know it's the guy before I turn around, and as I do, he is literally running full speed towards me. I look him dead in the eyes, ready to fight for my life. As I do this, my mother answers her phone, and I say, "Hi, Mom." He slows right down to a light jog and says, "Evening," as he jogs past me. I ask my mom to stay on the line. Her comes out to meet me at the top of the hill. The guy is nowhere to be seen. He was definitely running up behind me to strike me, and by turning to face him, I'm certain it threw him off. Story 13, not me, but my dad. I was too stupid to listen to him. I used to live on the roughest council estate in my hometown when I was very young. Very dangerous for anyone, let alone kids. So for that reason, my parents rarely let me outside, unless I was with other kids being supervised or within sight of my parents. This story is regarding the latter one. I wanted to go to the nearby park, but my dad said no, as there were some rough people over there, and that I could only play outside on the steps to our flat building, which I agreed to, although I had no intention of doing that, LOL. As soon as I went outside, I went right to the park and began playing. I kept glancing over at the 2 people and noticed them constantly looking over at me, which made me nervous, but I was like 5 years old, so care more about fun than my own safety. Anyway, the 2 people approached me. They'd been drinking and cornered me by a fence when I tried to run. They grabbed a hold of me when out of nowhere I heard my dad shouting at them. He ran over, and it's the only time I ever saw him get physical with anybody, but he handed their asses to them while screaming obscenities at them for putting their hands on his son. He grabbed a hold of my arm and dragged me back home, all while swearing at me for being so stupid. I got a good hiding over that and was grounded for weeks. Years later, I asked him about it, and he told me that he just knew that I would go to the park, so follow me to keep an eye on me. He didn't expect anything to happen to me, but when it did, he went mental. Story 14, not me. But my mom saved me once when she woke up in the night and went looking for my biological dad because he wasn't in bed. She saw him just outside my door staring at me, and she described it as disturbing and said it made her nauseous. She didn't know what made her say it, but she told him to get away from me. A few years later in 2010, my half-sister finally broke down and revealed that my biological dad had been molesting her for 12 years. My sister told me a few years ago that he threatened her that he would start on me and my other sister if she did anything. Edit wow. I didn't expect this to blow up this much. I want to take the time to say that if you or someone you know has beanies being assaulted, speak up and speak out, spread awareness, and seek justice for what has happened. You'll be okay. And although things will be painful for a long time, maybe even forever, you will make it and you'll find some sense of being all right. Be a man, woman, or other. If you keep pushing, you will escape this tunnel. Talk to your friends, talk to your family. And if you have neither, then talk to a stranger who is willing to listen. I believe in you. Story 15, there's been a few times where I hadn't listened to my gut, but one sticks out where I did. I used to live in a smaller Minnesotan town down near some train tracks and a bike running path that extends out of town into the woods. One evening, I'm sitting outside on my porch drinking a couple of beers with my buddy. Two dudes walk up on us kind of out of nowhere, and immediately something seemed off with them. It's a college town, and drunk people come up onto your porch a lot, or randomly just say hello on their way to or from the bars downtown. But these dudes had a bad vibe to them. I had a little black Louisville Slugger lying next to me on the porch, so I grabbed and just held it across my lap. One dude asks us, "You guys got an extra smoke?" Buddy says, "Nope." The other guy comes up real close, almost onto the porch, and says, "Did you see my face? I just kept looking forward, but not directly at him, and just said, 'Nah, man, we didn't see anything.' He said something like, 'Good, Lil,' and they both walked away. 2 nights later, I'm sitting in my living room with the same buddy, and the local news is on. 2 guys arrested for robbing and stabbing a man a couple nights back on the trail down by the train tracks next to where I live. My buddy had looked at their faces coming up, and I had seen the dude clear as day that had asked for the smoke. It was those same guys. Story 16 was riding my motorcycle with a friend on the back. We were going down a country road behind a truck hauling a bunch of old car tires when all of a sudden I decided we shouldn't be there, so I slowed way down and let the truck go ahead of us. Just as I did when the tires fell off the truck and landed right where we would have been. Story 17 was hunting for early morels and King Bolit's last, May up near Silly Elm. No luck, so went further over towards Hancock, about 23 RDS up a hillside. I felt like I was being watched. I slowly realized that I couldn't hear any animals making noise, hackles raised. I immediately started down the most direct path to my car. One trail above where I was parked, I saw a partial juvenile male deer skeleton under a large conifer. As I double-timed it past, I looked up and saw the rest of the bones and sinew slung up in the branches. Out came the knife, and I slowed down, turning and scanning every few yards until I got into my car and booked it out of there. The next day, 2 mountain bikers were attacked by a cougar, and one was killed very near to the area I was hiking. I carry a handgun now for my mushroom hunts. Story 18, I had something like this one time in elementary school when we had a recess. It was pretty average and we left at the normal time, but it just felt very off to me. But because I was 8 and didn't have common sense yet, I brushed the feeling off. Turns out that there was literally a guy that had been scoping out the playground for kids to lure to him in a stereotypical large white van. Edit grammar. Story 19 was at a farmer's market in downtown Chico, California with my wife. I'm tall and white, and my wife is Asian and vertically challenged. And over the crowd, I saw 2 very rough-looking gentlemen, one really tall and the other short with a swastika tattooed on his forehead like Charles Manson. Little tattooed man, and I made eye contact from maybe 50 away, and he gestured to his friend, and then he pointed at me. I alerted my wife and told her that we were leaving immediately. She thought I was majorly overreacting and wanted to continue shopping, but I overruled her, and we left. Maybe 6 months later, we were watching America's Most Wanted, and guess who showed up for double murder over meth in Oroville, California? My 2 buddies, we still talk about that from time to time, and it still gives me goosebumps 15 years later. Story 21st time was 3 weeks after getting my gallbladder out. I felt terrible. I still had a drain in my stomach. I called my sister and said, I'm afraid I'll be dead tomorrow. Went to the emergency room, and turns out the surgeon had nicked my liver, and I was bleeding internally. It turned into a blood blister on my liver, and if it popped, I would have bled to death. Second time, I had been feeling like someone was squeezing around my chest for months. I passed out one morning, went to the hospital, and they found a tumor between my heart and lungs. Turned out to be cancer. A couple surgeries and chemo, and Eve been in remission almost 5 years. Story 21. I was in Turkey for vacation when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I made friends with some other tourists, but also some locals, all around the age range of 8 to 16. These two local guys were about 16, and at one point during the late afternoon, they asked if I wanted to go with them to go-kart outside of the hotel area, and I agreed. Approximately 30 seconds of walking along with them, I got the most chilling feeling I've ever had in my life. All the hairs on my skin rose up, and I had this super uneasy feeling deep in my gut. It actually felt like some supernatural force was beckoning me to dip. I turned on my heels and sprinted so fast to get back to the hotel. I didn't even look back. When I returned, my mother asked where I had been. I told her I was taking a rough. Oddly enough, I was quite fond of those guys before this happened. But thinking about this in retrospect, why would two local 16-year-olds have any genuine interest in go-karting with a young 8-year-old tourist? I feel like I may have dodged a bullet. We may never know. Story 22. I am a petite woman and was 19 at the time, had a late shift that ended at 10 p.m., hit the grocery before my walk home about 10 blocks. I've got arms full of groceries and notice a car drive past me in the opposite direction, heard it pull a U-turn behind me and park. I tell myself, probably just getting home from work too, but then I hear footsteps behind me. I turn around and it's a man in his 30s. ID guess. He doesn't say anything but stops walking when I stop walking. I keep walking, a bit faster now, and I can hear him speed up too. I turn around again and say, hey man, what's up? He says nothing. I turn around and keep walking, almost at a mini jog pace, and I hear him speed up too. I was about 4 blocks away from home. The adrenaline kicked in. I dropped my bags and booked it. Made it home. Told my boyfriend what was happening. As he goes outside to find the guy, dude drives by in his car right past my house. We call the cops, give them a description, and the operator tells us they've had other calls about the same guy, really hoping he never actually caught someone, really hoping his creepy wound up in jail, really happy. I listened to my gut. Story 23. This happened about 12 years ago. There were missing women in the area, but the city I lived in was big in adult entertainment, and the workers typically have a transient lifestyle, so we weren't sure if it was just rumors. I should also mention this is a border town. Anyways, I went out for a meal with coworkers after shutting the bar down. This was around the time a smoking bylaw came into effect, and you could no longer smoke under awnings. After I finished eating, I went out for a smoke by myself. It is about 3 a.m. at this point. The awning ended adjacent to the parking lot, and there was a car with out-of-country plates on it from across the border. The restaurant was also a motel, so there was a second story where there were rooms. As I'm smoking, this creepy guy from inside follows me out. It was winter, and he was sitting at the bar alone drinking a milkshake. Not weird in and of itself, but something was off about him. He begins to approach me, making unwavering eye contact, and starts saying really weird stuff. I figured since I was getting the cold shoulder inside, I should come stand out in the cold. This was 12 years ago, so I can't remember much detail on what he was saying, but every hair on my body stood up. I knew something was really wrong. And as he reached into his pockets and continued walking towards me, I became acutely aware of how close I was to what I now guessed was this man's car. He wasn't large or physically imposing, but I couldn't see his hands, and something about how he looked at me. It was like looking into the eyes of a predator, cliche, I know. But I had no doubt he was planning on abducting me. I just knew. It was a primal sense of I have to do something. My back is against the wall, his car, and the empty parking lot to my right, and this creep edging closer and closer, blocking my path into the restaurant door, which is about 70 feet away across the patio. He is no longer speaking, and is approaching almost within arm's reach. I knew I had to fight him, or I would end up in his trunk. Seconds before I'm about to kick him in the... You could hear the footsteps of someone coming down the steps from the hotel. At that exact moment, he took a giant step back and took his hands out of his pockets. It confirmed every horrible suspicion I had. An innocent person wouldn't react that way. I flicked my smoke and ran inside. A bunch of bouncers from the bar were eating, and I told them as quickly as I could what happened. Within the 20 seconds it took to explain, the man and his car were gone. To this day, I know if that person didn't come down those stairs at that exact moment, he likely would have tagged me and put me in the truck of his car. Edit for clarity. Story 24. I live in Southern California, and growing up living by the beach, I would go surfing a lot. Almost every day during the summer with my buddies. One day, I wanted to go, but no one else could go, so I decided it was fine and I would go by myself. Not a huge deal. I've gone surfing alone in the past, and there are always other people in the line up to hang around. Anyway, I get to the beach, and when I paddle out, I notice there wasn't anyone out yet. More waves for me, I thought, but after a while, something just felt off. I don't really know how to explain it, but it was a very, very eerie feeling, as if I was being watched. I don't think I've ever felt such an acute feeling like that before since then, but I just listened to my gut feeling and paddled in and went home. The next morning, a swimmer died at that exact beach from a great white shark attack. I haven't been surfing since, and that was 10 years ago. Story 25. This is a 1,000,000% true story about the time my addiction to cigarettes saved me life on 911. I live in Pennsylvania, but used to work in Manhattan when I was 20 and still living at home with my folks. My older brother also worked in NYC, and we usually took the same train to get up to the city. One fall morning, my brother had to go into the city early for a meeting, so I went with him to the station to catch the early train. This would have got me to my office pretty early, and since I was a junior help desk guy, I didn't have much I could do if I got to work early. And I'd been up to the top of both the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty before, but never to the observation deck of the World Trade Center, so I figured why not take the early train, hop off with my brother to cross into Lower Manhattan, and go taking the view. I'd be a little late to work, but no problem. The train pulls in, and I just felt compelled to have a smoke. Like the single most important thing in the world was for me to just sit on a bench, light another cigarette, and let that train go. So I told my brother I'd catch the next train and head straight to work. I'd go to the World Trade Center another day. And that's what I did. I lit a cigarette, I waited for the next train, and got to New York City in the middle of the waking nightmare that was 911. Story 26. So, can I write my partner's story? It's so much better than mine. This is a bit of a novel, so there's a super condensed TLDR at the end. I'm a type 1 diabetic with gastroparesis and chronic vomiting disorder. When I get sick, I get really sick. Back in early January, I got a stomach bug for my daughter. After not being able to hold down even water for a few hours, and my blood sugar spiking upwards with insulin, not even touching to my partner, and I Ubered to the closest hospital. I was given 4 fluids and Antiemetics plus 4 insulin for a few hours, and then told that it had gotten me through the peak of my illness and sent me home. As soon as I got home and the meds wore off, I was back in the exact same spot. So 3 days later, we go back to the ER, exact same song and dance. As the doc was telling me she was going to send me home, I was leaning over the side of the bed and puking into a bag my partner was holding. She had to raise her voice to be heard above my retching to tell me, "I think you're fine, and I'm sending you home." I begged her to keep me longer for treatment. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that and felt unsafe going home like that. She basically told me that was too bad and that they needed the ER bay for someone with an emergency and not the tummy flu. I don't actually remember much after that. I remember going home and asking my partner to kill me because it hurt so bad and no one would help me. I remember paramedics in my house. I remember being in emergency and suddenly not being able to breathe after 9 failed attempts to get in 4 in my dehydrated veins. Then I just remember my partner saying, "This is too much. I need to call your mom. I'm sorry." And then I woke up 2 days later in the ICU. So I guess after we got home from the second-hour visit, I was still uncontrollably vomiting and heaving. My blood sugar wouldn't budge a single mole, so I was wetting down my hair with washcloths in bed while I was puking into a giant mixing bowl. He says he wanted to empty it for me and noticed solid pieces in the stomach bile and had a terrible feeling about it. I hadn't eaten anything or even had more than a few sips of water for the past week. There shouldn't have been anything solid. So he ended up calling 911 for me. When the paramedics got there, they said I was so sick they would have to take me to the closest hospital, the same one that kept sending me home. So he lied to the EMTs, told them my endocrinologist was at a different hospital, so they'd have to take me there. He saved my life that night, without question. My body had gone into complete DKA and was starting to eat my internal organs for energy, the solid bits of my puke, pieces of my stomach lining, apparently. If it wasn't for him, I would have stayed home that night and most likely died in my sleep. His gut feeling told him I needed help, and he was right. TLDR. So realized I was sicker than we thought and called 911 apparently just in time. Story 27. So I politely rejected a guy who asked me out randomly once at a bus stop. He was perfectly civil and not unattractive. He took no for an answer graciously, but I just got a really bad vibe for whatever reason and decided to take a bus in the opposite direction at the last second straight to my boyfriend's house to get away from him. Reading the paper a few days later, there was a really awful, brutal animal cruelty incident right around that intersection. Don't want to get any more specific for the sake of anonymity, and the suspect's sketch description looked almost freaking identical to the bus stop guy. Who knows how he treats women if he mutilates animals? I still get really uncomfortable thinking about it. Story 28. I smoke weed. One day, I text my dealer. He takes a while to respond, but eventually replies with "Shit's hot right now, bro. But you can drop by real quick." I also ask for a half ounce, which is big jail time for possession where I live. So I'm driving to his house and am about 10 minutes away when I suddenly just feel so nauseous and uneasy for some reason. I think about what he said and ultimately decide to just go home. That night on the news, there's a report about a large meth bust that had occurred earlier in the day and that 6 people had been arrested. It was my dealer's house. I'm still grateful to this day that I decided to turn around. Otherwise, I'd be in prison. Edit, I don't smoke anymore. Story 29, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. It's one of many, but this one stands out. I'm about 7, my neighbor's 8, 9, and we're at a bus stop. Guy in stereotypical white van pulls up and asks if we've seen a dog. He doesn't describe the dog, and the truth is dogs ran around our neighborhood. My mother taught me stranger danger since as long as I can remember. So one of the boys at the stop, we'll call him Paul. Paul describes a dog, and man in van is like, "That's my dog. Why don't you get inside the van? We can all go look for him." Well, I had red flags going off at this point and said, "No, I have to ask my mother." And as soon as those words left my mouth, he peeled out. It was only later that I realized I saved us all from child abduction. Specifically, Paul, who was walking toward the van to get in. Teach your kids what to do if this situation happens. Get the license plate, the guy's face, the car type, and what to do if something does happen. If I had known to snag his plates, we might have had a chance at catching him, but I only knew to say no. Another time I was speeding down a hill and thought, what if there's a deer around the corner? So I slowed down, and sure enough, there were 3 deer in the road. Saved my own life by a rando thought. Story 30 was hiking by myself, real smart. I get this feeling that something wasn't right, but I normally act on that feeling. That day, however, I ignored it, went to a lookout, turned around, and headed back. About the same place as I got the feeling, I noticed cougar tracks cross mine in the snow. They followed mine for a few meters, and then went to a bit of shrub that overlooked both where I was now and the lookout. I immediately left and avoided going anywhere near something that would give a cougar cover. Occasionally behind me, I would notice a small rustle in the bushes and trees or some snow falling off a disturbed branch. Story 31, an ex of mine baited me into coming over with suicide threats. When I walked in, it was clear Head had some sort of break. The cupboards had all been drawn on with chalk and paint, and the covers of all of his books had been ripped off and taped to the walls. I brushed it off as something artsy since he was that type of guy. He was acting normal for the first 10 minutes or so. I thought he was depressed. Then he asked me if I'd heard the voices of the aliens too. I asked him if Head stopped taking his meds. He had a history of mental illness, and at the same time started reading the words on the cupboards, "Well, I'll be free, resist, etc." My stomach flipped, and I dialed 911, pretending I was receiving a call from my dad. He proceeded to tell me the aliens had declared we would be together or be with no one else, that he would free me. He kept talking while I pretended the operator was my dad. The woman got the hint and dispatched police and kept me on the phone as long as possible. By the time the police arrived, ID had to hang up and was stuck in a corner while he raved about how Head free me. Once they managed to get him out of the apartment, he was taken to a hospital for proper treatment. Occasionally, I get calls from that hospital. I don't answer. Story 32. I was like 5 or 6 when my mom and sisters wanted to go for a drive out of town. I cried and cried because I just didn't want to go with them for some reason and decided to go with my other sister in her car. Turns out, my mom and other sisters ended up crashing, and they said if you were in the car, you would have had to sit in the middle, and you would have died. Luckily, my fam was okay, though. But I sure did feel really cool after that.